Hello everybody, welcome to Red Carpet Ready with me, Gregory Arlt. I'm the Director of Makeup Artistry for MAC based out of Los Angeles. I am joined by my lovely model, Anka. Say hi.
Hello guys.
Hello. So I work out of Los Angeles. I'm based there, born and raised. And I always say there's 4 seasons in Los Angeles. There's spring, summer, winter, and awards. So for Red Carpet Beauty, it's really just making somebody the A+ version of themselves. I did a little prep and prime natural radiance on her skin. And right now, my go-to foundation is the Studio Water Weight. It does have an SPF, so you can wear it with confidence. And I guarantee that because there is sunscreen, it doesn't actually bounce back onto the camera. So you really do get an accurate version of skin tone. I already, it's like a cooking show on TV. I magically prepared her skin a little bit with some foundation, but I'm gonna put a bit more on to her skin. You should really treat foundation like skincare. If your skin is oily, go for something a little bit more matte. If your skin is dry, go for something more hydrating. What I love about the Studio Water Weight is that it really does work with pretty much every skin type. Really, I start in the center of the face. I'm using a 190 foundation brush. And it's interesting because years ago I read in a magazine, a makeup artist was quoted as saying, you should lift the foundation, it lifts the spirits. It lifts peach fuzz, okay? So go down, go with the grain. If you have a problematic skin or if you have any texture or what have you, I always try to do a sheer veil of foundation and then add a little bit more coverage where necessary. In this world of HD TV, oh my gosh, I always said, HD TV is great to watch a whale migrating to Alaska, but when you're an over 40 actress or even over 15, every single thing shows. So what I love about this particular foundation is it literally is camera ready. And so what I'm gonna do is just take a little bit of the Beauty Blender, kind of work downward. Remember that, it's all about the Blenjamins, baby. Just blend. So the color that I've used is NC15. You always want to make sure that there's no demarcation, that your foundation and the body match up as much as possible. Because typically my clients aren't wearing a turtleneck and long sleeves on the red carpet. They're showing skin and they might pose like this. And if you want to just add a little bit extra hydration and really set the foundation, Fix Plus. I love Fix Plus. My personal favorite scent is rose. So I'm just gonna go ahead and spray your face to set the foundation and then just blend it all in because I like a little teeny bit of a glow to the skin. And we'll powder. I'll powder her strategically. Now you can spray the Fix Plus directly onto your Beauty Blender if you want to. If you wanted to add a little bit of concealer, you can at this point. One of my favorite concealers to use, the Studio Water Weight Concealer, there is that version, and also just our concealer palette, which is a little bit more of a cream finish. Just a hint under the eyes, not too much. I'm using it with a fluffy brush, a 217S. Go around the nose as well, because this area tends to get a little red, and also if there's any oil in this area, the foundation can separate a little bit if you're not too careful. I'm gonna say the C word, you guys, right here on live TV. Contour. Okay, so a lot of people say, well, wait a minute, I'm so confused, you're not contouring. Why? Where's the contour? What's happening? It looks amazing when they're looking right at the camera, but then when their head turns, you see a stripe. The effect kind of gets lost a little bit. And so I prefer actually highlighting. I like to highlight because whenever you lighten something, it stands out. Whenever you darken something, it recedes. So if I start to highlight her face, which I'm gonna do with the concealer, the color I'm using is NC10. I'm actually gonna take a little bit right down the high planes of her face using the same brush. And this concealer is about a half a shade lighter. So it's gonna look a little bit more natural. And then I'm gonna take my Beauty Blender, so it really becomes one with the skin. It's very zen. How do you set the concealer and what do you do under the eyes so it doesn't look too textured or anything like that? Now I realize that Anka's, beautiful, not a line on her face. I'm a little jealous, but that's okay. If you really need to powder under the eyes, one of my favorite products to use is the Mineralized Skin Finish Natural. And what I love about this is it's so lightweight Doesn't matter what age you're working on, it doesn't have the ability to collect in any lines. So I love this for the red carpet. So I take it with a very, like a smaller fluffy brush. How do the kids on YouTube do it? Number 240S, set the makeup under the eyes. And then you find it will take away the shine, it sets the concealer so that there's not any creasing. It doesn't build up onto the skin, which is great. When I'm on set working with a client, I use this brush oftentimes to touch up. It's funny because when you hear powder, you think, oh my gosh, most people want to run screaming for the hills and don't use powder on me, it's too aging and all this kind of stuff. But what I love about the Mineralized Skin Finish Natural is it doesn't have the heaviness that a lot of powders out there do. If you use a sponge and you really, or a puff and you really pack it on, it's gonna be heavier. So I like to use brushes. This is the number 150 and 150, and close your eyes. And I make sure I go over the lids as well because I'm going to be using shadows and I want to make sure that everything really stays. You know, oftentimes if I'm doing a client for the red carpet, I will send them off with a bit of blot powder. It literally disperses and absorbs oil from the skin without building up onto the skin. It's super natural. I think there's some magic going on in that powder. Now that her face is kind of where I want it, this is actually now, if I was going to contour, which I will, this is where the contour will come into play. I'm using the Studio Fix contour and highlight palette, and the color that I'm using is called taupe. It literally looks like shadow. So what I was gonna say is a lot of cosmetic companies, MAC included, will oftentimes make their contour colors a little warmer, so it looks a little more friendly on the skin. I'm using it with a number 168S brush. You're not going around the curvature of the cheek with the whole brush, because then you'll get that stripe that we're trying to avoid. A little bit here, very, very soft, as natural and as undetectable as possible. So, my first step after I get the skin all done, and everything else goes on pretty quickly after that, I like putting blush on because I think psychologically a client might look in the mirror and they see their skin all one color and think, oh, is this too pale or is this too much makeup? So I like to put a little burst of blush on the skin because I find that it sort of like soothes the savage beast. At MAC, obviously, there are many, 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 many different blushes to choose from, but one of my favorite types of blush to use specifically for the red carpet is a blush that has a bit of a sheen to it. So I'm using a color called Spring Sheen, like Bruce Springsteen. Just a soft brush, and I have my client smile just like she's doing because A, she has a beautiful smile, and I like someone smiling back to me. But it makes the skin a little taut. And you know, some people will go like this to do their blush. I'm like, are you gonna walk around like that today? Probably not. And you know, one of the biggest trends that we saw backstage this season at Fashion Week, as well as on the red carpet, is blush. And a little bit warmer. I like to use colors that are a little warmer on the skin because I think that HDTV loves warmth. It loves anything that's sort of candlelit. Cooler colors work as well, but I always tend to err towards health. And then my little secret to sort of set the blush is to take just your powder brush again. I'm not going back into the powder, but I'm taking this brush to sort of blend the blush onto the cheek. It's funny because speaking of trend and the red carpet, I always joke and say the trend on the red carpet is pretty. That's the trend. But I have seen like what I've identified as sort of 3 really strong trends on the red carpet. One of which is a very clean sort of face, the ingenue sort of look, which is what I'm gonna do on Anka. A more classic Hollywood look, maybe a cat eye and a red lip, which is one of my favorite kind of looks to do if you've seen my work. I love pinup and I love vintage and that kind of thing, or a clean eye and a red lip. And then the third trend that I've really seen on the red carpet that I've done a lot on clients is more of a smoky eye and a softer mouth. You know, there's always gonna be an incarnation of a red lip. Sometimes they're more blue-red, sometimes they're more pink or bright. Let's move on to the eyes. Let's do some eyes. I'm gonna keep this very soft, very natural, which I love because again, I'm playing a little bit more with points of light as opposed to really specific, dark, dramatic makeup. So she's got great eyebrows. I'm just gonna brush them up. And actually, they're really quite perfect. I don't really need to fill them in. But if you did fill them in, and I just might a little bit, because why not? I actually really love to use the eyebrow styler. And the color I'm using is called Lingering. Just a soft amount, just to kind of fill in some of the blanks. And I chose this color because Lingering is that perfect sort of warmer kind of blonde tone, because her eyebrows naturally are pretty dark and her hair is blonde, so you want to find a nice balance. I love an eyebrow. It's one of my favorite features. You too?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Very important.
Eyebrow down, I tell ya. Wait, what? There's a brush on the end, how great. So I'm just gonna brush them into place. And if I did have a client with maybe a little bit more of an unruly brow, I might go in with a little bit of brow set. We do make a waterproof brow set, which is incredible if you have those clients that are a little bit more, who perspire a little bit more, or if your skin tends to be a little more oily. Moving on to the eyes. Now I love anything, like I said, gold, warm, all that kind of stuff. I want to give her just a really soft, sort of more natural look, but I want it to stay on. I want something that's gonna last, because a red carpet event is usually a lot longer. I'm gonna use some Pro Longwear Paint Pot, a great product to use as a base. Now you can use it alone, you can use it as eyeshadow on its own, but I'm gonna use just a little bit. The color I'm using is called Bear Study. And what I love about this product is it's got a little bit of a shimmer to it. And I'm just gonna use it again with a number 217S brush. It's gonna hold it on all day. That's actually what I use on my own eyes. I use Indian wood because it's a little bit of a gold and it really holds the shadow on nicely. And you'll really find using these Pro Longwear paint pots is a game changer because it really does keep the shadow on, which is incredible. And that's the whole goal. You don't want, if you're sending someone out onto the red carpet or going to an event or a wedding, and we can't come with them usually, so we want to make sure that this is our little insurance policy. And while it's still wet, because there is a little bit of playtime to it, I'll put a bit of a shadow over it. And the palette that I'm really obsessed with for the red carpet is our Eyes x9 Amber. And it's a really, I'm sorry to put this right in front of your face, but it's a good camera shot. So basically, Eyes x9, this color is called Kitties, like meow. And I'm just gonna use a bit of this color on her lids. It's a really beautiful sort of taupey gold. It just makes the eyes look a little bit expensive and a little glamorous. I'm gonna go ahead and do a little bit of sculpting on her eye. And I'm going right back into that Eyes x9 palette. And the two brushes that I'm gonna use, a number 275S, and the color that I'm using is called Georgia Peach. And the whole point of this, and look straight up, using this wider brush, I'm gonna use this right under the lash line to bring a little bit of definition without being too heavy. And basically this technique works with any color, because the idea is I'm gonna keep her eye clean, not a lot of liner, but there's definitely gonna be mascara, but I want it to just sort of wrap around the eye because it makes the eye look a little more diffused. And it's a little wider on the outer and a little thinner towards the inner. And I'm gonna show you how this blends in beautifully. So I'll take my Beauty Blender again, and this is where I use the point of the Beauty Blender right underneath that shadow, and it just gives a really beautiful sort of diffused edge. Then we're gonna go into the crease, and I'm going to use a number 224S brush. This is what I jokingly call the idiot-proof brush, because anyone can use it. Same color, Georgia Peach. I feel like I have to say that with a Southern accent, but my mother was from North Carolina, so I'm bilingual. I don't really like to see where things start and stop. So if I did do a more of a dramatic line underneath, I'd still want a little bit of diffusion under there. So what I'm doing here is, and actually just look down without closing, perfect. Just taking it right here into the crease of her eye. Well, so what I did, kind of working in reverse, is when I did her foundation and her concealer, I did go over her lids. Kind of old school, you know what I mean? Like before primers and paint pots and all that kind of stuff. If you want to go further than that, but you don't want the frost of a paint pot, and not all paint pots are frosted, by the way. There are some that are matte, but you could take the 24-hour eye base, and my preferred way of using it is actually just with my finger. I like using my ring finger, padded, soft, and just kind of tapping it over the eyelid and then doing your shadows. I might not use liner. I may or may not, I'm not sure, I have to see. With makeup, it's not always paint by numbers, you know? It's like, oh, well, you have to use it, and because you know, it really does depend on the look of the eye, how we're feeling about it. But I do like a little brow highlighter, I can't lie. And you could do the Pro Longwear paint pot all the way up to the brow, but I'm gonna do something, a color that I really, really love called rice paper, which is also in the Eyes x9 Amber palette. So I'm gonna mix it with a little bit of that Kitty's, just a little, and a little rice paper, and just a small amount under the brow to really just sort of make that brow bone pop out a little bit more. So we're gonna go ahead and do some mascara. Many mascaras to choose from. One of my absolute favorites is Extended Play Giga Black. Why do I love this mascara so much? Well, I'll tell you why. I'm glad you asked. I love it because of this little wand. And it's funny because with this little wand, you really can control and get in there. If time permitted, I probably would use some false lashes, but I'm just gonna go ahead and smack some mascara on her. But what I like to do is I start at a diagonal and really get it to the root of the lash. Okay, and I sort of wiggle it back and forth a little bit. And then in the center, I work forward and then look that way. And then for the inner lashes, I push towards the bridge of the nose. I like them to really fan out nicely, and it really does make a big difference. The reason why I chose this particular sort of red carpet look is because it is a little softer, and there is a trend on the red carpet to have a little bit more of a fresher look, but you know, the joke is it takes 12 eyeshadows to get the natural look. Although in this case, it was just three or four. I like to use, and I did this on her as well, I like to do a full lash curler, and then I also like to do the little one for the outer corners, or sometimes there's the rogue lash that sticks straight down and you've got that client, you're like, oh my God, or yourself. And so this will really, really open up the eye nicely, and it's great. And the reason why I like to use mascara is because the point of mascara is to open up the eye, right? And if you've got really straight lashes and you're putting a ton of mascara on them, then you've created a lovely awning that you can have a little picnic lunch under. I really do recommend curling the lashes. You might even hand the lash curler to your client if you're a little nervous about it. But think of it like you're painting a wall. So you want the first coat to dry before you do the second coat, because if you add another coat to a wet coat, then it just becomes a big mangled mess. With mascara, it's the same thing. If you want to do another coat and your lashes are still wet, sometimes it could take like, 5 lashes into one spike. And it's a look, but I think for this, I like them a little bit more feathery, a little softer. So while I'm waiting for the top lashes to dry, I'm gonna go ahead and do a little bit of highlighting because it's the highlight of my day. And my favorite highlighting palette is the Hyper Real Glow. This is an amazing, incredible palette that actually has 3 beautiful, you can tell which one I love the most. It's got 3 amazing highlighters in it because her skin's more on the pale side. I'm gonna use this lighter one. I don't believe the actual color has a name, so we're gonna call it Far Left, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and use it back with that number 240S brush, which is the brush that I used under her eyes to set the concealer. A small amount. I don't want to look like we can land a plane with the highlighter on her face. I want it to still have a nice realism to it. So just a small amount. I do like a little highlight down the nose. I don't want it to look like a little exclamation point, the highlight that goes straight line and then a dot. Nothing wrong with that, no tea, no shade, but I do like it to look a little bit more natural than supernatural. Funny because, back in the day we used to powder our noses to not look shiny, and now we're adding shine. I will do the bottom lashes as well, but in the meantime, let's talk about lips. So as you're well aware, MAC has always been the forerunner of lip products, and we're always coming out with new innovative products, and we have a brand new lipstick formula that I'm obsessed with, and it's called Powder Kiss. And you might have heard a lot about it. It's a big trend right now. We used it backstage during Fashion Week a lot, and it's one of my favorite trends for the red carpet, Powder Kiss, because it almost sounds like an oxymoron. It's a sheer matte, and we've never, ever really seen a sheer matte. How about if I just show you? So her lips are naturally a beautiful, incredible color, so I'm gonna work with those lips. And the color that I'm using is called Sweet No Sugar. I wanna give her that little pink, pouty sort of stain. So I wanna show you this in all its glory, but then of course, because I do like shiny things, I'm gonna put a little gloss over it. And what I meant about that sort of soft focus is, you can blur out the edges. Now, I do love lip liner, and I'll use lip liner typically for the red carpet as an insurance policy, you know, to make sure that we have nice definition, that it looks good. But in this case, I just want it to look more like a stain. And the brush now, I can get into these little hard to reach places, and just, you can rub. It does, and normally when my clients rub their lips together, I go like, don't do that because the lips are so perfect. But in this case, it's totally okay. You know, you have my permission. And even though I love this sort of as-is moment, I am gonna put a little bit of gloss over it because I can't be stopped. I'm using Dazzle Glass. Dazzle Glass is one of my favorite lip gloss products because it's got really generous amounts of pearl, so it's not necessarily the gloss that makes it shiny, which it is, but it's also the pearl that's in it. And the color I'm using is called Moth to Flame, and this is probably one of my red carpet staples. Now, I mean, again, disclaimer, I loved the lip as it was, but to add a little bit of a glow to it really does sort of seal the deal and gives it a little bit more of that finished look. So then I'm gonna go ahead and do a little bit on the bottom. We're almost done. And go ahead and look it straight up for me. Thank you. I don't want it to look like she has an insect living under her eyes, so I'm gonna go very sheer. I use a new mascara for everybody. I'm not a huge fan of the disposable applicators for me because number one, it's never the same wand as the formula that you're using. And number two, I kind of feel like a pterodactyl, like a T-Rex, like I'm holding it, it's all small and weird, so I like to have the control. So one last little drop O makeup. I mean, I could leave Well Enough alone, but I just can't be stopped. Now I'm gonna show you my other favorite palette, Eyes x9 Burgundy. So this is the burgundy version of the amber one. I just wanted to add the tiniest amount of liner, and I'm gonna use this color in the center. It's called Embark, and I'm using it with a number 266 angle brush. I want her lashes to look a little bit more full on the outer corners, and one of my biggest tricks is to do just a little shadow smudged into the lash line. So just a bit right here. And again, the color I'm using is called Embark. And I'm literally just touching it into the lash line. Sometimes, you know, you have to double team with the hairdresser. In fact, speaking of hair, I'm gonna take this out now because we're almost done, and I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful hairstyle. I usually take about 45 minutes to an hour back, like behind the scenes, working with a client. So usually the hairdresser will come in, they'll set the hair, put it up. I'll do the makeup while the hair is being set. Sometimes, if the client's really in a hurry, I work with hair, and sometimes that is like doing its makeup on a moving target, you know, because they're being blow dried and all that kind of stuff. But I usually say I would build in an hour if you can. Okay, so it's interesting because I typically don't usually work with male clients. Now, with that being said, when I have, it so depends on the guy. And it's so funny because I find in my experience, most male I mean, actors are so used to having makeup on, so they're into it. Most men are usually like, oh, no, don't put that much on me. Hey, can we do a little more here? Hey, what about that? And then suddenly they're in full drag. I'll usually use a little bit of concealer where needed, powder. One of my favorite products that I use on myself from head to toe pretty much is the Prep and Prime Skin Refined Zone Treatment. This is excellent for men. And it's also good for women too, but it kind of mattifies everything. And also sometimes with guys, I'll give a little lash curl, a little brow set. So this is literally my finished look. I mean, it's easy, it's a quick red carpet look, and thank you for supporting MAC. Bye.